What's up guys, today I'm going to be doing a complete stratagem tier list for Helldivers 2. You know how these work. At the top in the S column are going to be the very best stratagems, and down in the hot caca section is where you're going to find the most rank, most stinkiest, worst stratagems in the game. I will provide a brief explanation on where I put each stratagem and why. Whether you're brand new or a veteran, this is going to give you a good idea on which stratagems are the best in my opinion. And if you agree with any of my opinions, let me know down in the comments. Or, if you disagree, tell me why and where you'd put them instead. Also, I wanted to quickly mention, maybe you're watching this video in the background because you've been trying to get into Helldivers and you're stuck at servers at capacity or some other issues caused by overloaded servers. Well, I just want to say I have found a way to bypass all those errors. So far, it's worked 100% of the time. I made a very short video about it. There's a link in the description, or you could click on the card in the top right. And on top of that, if you'd like to do your own stratagem tier list, fill one out with friends, or even make your own video about it, I made my tier list graphic open source for everyone to use. The link's in the description. Anyways, let's get into it. Up first, we have the stratagems in the Patriotic and Mission Center. These are going to be all the weapons that will take your third weapon slot. So much value in a lot of these. Starting with the machine gun. Now the machine gun's a very fun weapon to use, especially when you're just spraying at crowds of bugs. However, to reload you have to stand still, which could be pretty tricky if you need to do so in a pinch. Therefore, I'm going to put this one in a B tier. Next up, we have the anti-material rifle. I personally think this beautiful firearm is underrated, and I don't see a lot of people running this. It does some good work against bugs, and you can use this thing to take out bots from a distance very easily if you're targeting their weak points. For that, this is going into my B tier. Next, we have the Stalwart, which, just like the machine gun, is a very fun gun to use and run around and spray down some bugs. The only drawback, in my opinion, is I found it to have a tough time penetrating armor, but you do get a ton of ammo and can reload while moving, unlike the machine gun. This one deserves a B tier. Next is the Expendable Anti-Tank. Now, these things are super good. Not only do you get 2 when you drop them, the cooldown is very fast, making this a really good, viable option when it comes to dealing with those larger, more armored enemies. If you're going to battle bots on any difficulty, especially the hardest 3 difficulties, consider bringing these because they take out tanks like a champ and you can keep them coming with a fast cooldown. Easily an S tier. Next we have the Recoilless Rifle. Now, the Recoilless Rifle is pretty strong and can dispatch armored enemies pretty quickly. The only drawback with this is if you're running this solo, the reload time will leave you too vulnerable for far too long. So if you miss your shot, you better get moving. I don't want to put this in the S tier, but I think it's just the fact with the long reload time and having to use a backpack slot, I think I'm going to have to bump it down to an A tier, but still overall a really good option to have. We're onto the Flamethrower. Now, this one's probably going to catch me some flack. Burning down hordes of bugs is super fun and all, but it's a total waste of a third weapon slot. At this state of the game, I think the fire damage needs to be greatly buffed and needs to spread easier. This is a very situational weapon that I would much rather bring in something else than to waste a stratagem slot on it. This is going right into the hot caca tier. It may be the first, but it certainly is not the last. Next is the Autocannon. Now, the Autocannon is awesome. It's another personal favorite of mine. It's very versatile. It's essentially a recoilless rifle, but with a faster reload. You also have a magazine, so you could follow up with extra rounds if necessary. Every shot you land does crazy damage to just about everything and can be used to destroy buildings. It's a very powerful and well-rounded weapon. Easily, I'm putting it into the S tier. Next up is the Railgun, another fun one to use. It's one of my personal favorites again, and it can be applied to so many different scenarios, and it packs a huge punch. This thing will punch a hole through just about anything you shoot. Just make sure you don't blow yourself up when using the unsafe mode. Easily going into the S tier. Finally, to wrap up the Patriotic Admission Center, we have the Spear. And I know a lot of people don't run this because they don't like it. It has its issues, I know. But I personally don't think it's hot poop. I think it's going to be a C tier, just because this thing is like a javelin in other games. It locks onto things, it blows up, boom. It does a huge amount of damage. The biggest issue for me is if you watch this clip right here, you'll see that the lock-on is very buggy. Like, I have a perfect shot lined up, and it just won't register that I'm trying to lock onto it. The reload time isn't awful, but combined with the weird lock-on situation, this is a C tier weapon. Up next, we have the Orbital Cannons. First up, Gatling Barrage. I'm not a huge fan of this one, I'll be honest. The area effect is on the smaller side, for which most situations will not work out too well. I could see this getting buffed in some way, perhaps by increasing the area effect, or perhaps just being more rounds being shot out of it. I would never waste a slot on this, and it really isn't worth buying even when you're new. This stratagem is what we call hot caca. Next is the Airburst Strike. This is way more effective than the Gatling Barrage, but still isn't that good in my opinion. It's perfect for throwing on top of a bug breach, and it has a wider area of effect, which is way more useful. But again, this is just another stratagem that I couldn't find myself choosing to bring in over a plethora of many other better options. Hot caca. Next is the Orbital 120mm High Explosive Barrage. This thing I do not like whatsoever. It is so inconsistent and it is so extremely unpredictable. There is just far too much RNG associated with this stratagem to make it effective when you need it to be. Along with that, we have the Orbital 380mm High Explosive Barrage, and we're gonna run it back for another poopy rank for this one because just like the 120mm, too inconsistent, too unpredictable. I feel like when I throw this one in, I gotta start sprinting in the opposite direction to not kill myself with it. But guess what? I still end up doing that. And this will it's either gonna kill you or your teammates. There's no way around it. There's just far too much RNG you have to rely on to make this useful. Next is the Walking Barrage. Now, it's similar to the Gatling, but it is exactly what the Gatling Barrage should be. It has a wider area, and it's a nice way to quickly dispatch a group of enemies. Now, it's not the best thing. I think I'm going to put this in the C tier. Next is the Orbital Laser. This definitely ranks top 5 stratagems that I always bring in, especially against bots. It's extremely effective in all scenarios, especially when you're getting swarmed and your brain just can't figure out which one to target first. Throw down one of these and it's going to take care of that for you. The only thing I dislike about it is the cooldown is pretty long, and while Bile Titans do take damage from it, they tank a lot of it. But it's still an easy S tier. Finally, to wrap up the Orbital Cannons, we have the Orbital Railcannon Strike. Now this thing is an absolute beast to use. It targets the largest enemy near where you choose and takes them out effortlessly. This thing is perfect for taking out those tanks or the stupid cannon towers. The only drawbacks are the lengthy cooldown and only killing one target. It is pretty hard to choose what tier this is. I want to give it an A tier, but I think for the sake of not getting destroyed in the comments by most of the community for my opinion over their beloved Railcannon, like I did in my rest weapon tier list, I'm going to put this in the S tier. Next up, we have the Hangar, where we're going to find a lot of fun stuff to use. A lot of the stratagems in the Hangar provide such amazing value, given that you can rearm all the Eagle stratagems and use them over and over and over for the duration of an entire mission. First is the Strafing Run. Now, we're going to start off bad with these, but it's going to get better, I promise. The Strafing Run is the definition of meh. The call-in time is super quick, but I find it lacks the amount of everyone is looking for. I think it's very underpowered right now, and as of right now, this is going in the hot caca. However, if it ever does get a buff, I could totally see this rising to a C tier and perhaps maybe a B tier, I'm not sure though. Next is the Eagle Airstrike, one of my all-time favorites. It's so versatile, there's a use for it in every situation. I pretty much bring this into about 100% of my raids. It takes out large groups of enemies, it can destroy buildings, and has multiple uses with a quick cooldown. And along with the Eagle Rearm, makes this one of the best stratagems easily. This is the definition of an S tier. Next is the Cluster Bomb. Now, perfectly placed, this could take out large chunks of enemies. If you're facing a wall of enemies, throw this down, and it's going to take out the trash like it was nothing. It comes with so many uses, plus the Eagle Rearm. It's an amazing option against both Terminids and bots. This is an A tier. Next is the Napalm Strike, and as much as I think calling this thing in is so cool to watch and it looks awesome, it really isn't effective at all. The same problem as the Flamethrower, it doesn't seem like the fire damage does as much as it should, especially when you're dropping napalm. This is going to go in the C tier, but if fire damage ever gets buffed, I could easily bump this up to a B tier. Next is the Jump Pack. Now, the Jump Pack is fun to use and can get you out of sticky situations, but I think it's just another one of those things where you have so many more valuable options to bring into battle. Not to mention it uses your backpack slot, so maybe I'm just not using it properly. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to put this in C tier though. Moving on, we have the Smoke Strike. Now, Smoke Strikes are super effective, especially when you're doing those evacuate missions, but a lot of the time you're much better off saving your stratagem slot for something more effective. If you're running with a team, it might be a good idea that one person has this on speed dial, but certainly isn't in one of my top choices. I'm going to put this in B tier. Next up is the 110mm rocket pods. Now, when these rockets hit, they hit hard, but They're very inaccurate and sometimes miss your enemies. I think they deserve a buff in some way, but as it stands for now, this is C tier. Finally, to wrap this up, we have the 500 kilogram bomb. I love this thing, and when it explodes, oh my god, it just provides such a beautiful spectacle. But watch this clip right here. Tell me why a direct hit to a Bile Titan's noggin with a 500 kilogram bomb is not an instant kill. Are you kidding me? This thing deserves to be so much more powerful, more damage, more range. It's so close to being an S tier, but oh my god, I just can't. Unless it gets buffed and it becomes an instant kill to the Bile Titan with a direct hit like that right in the head, it's going to be an A tier. Next up, we have the bridge. Starting with the Orbital Precision Strike, it's not a huge favorite of mine, but it is pretty effective, especially when starting out. It's got a low cooldown, a decent area of effect. What more could you ask for? I'm going to put this in the A tier. Next is the Gas Strike. Now this thing has been a hit or miss for me. Sometimes it did really well, sometimes it did absolutely nothing. It's very situational. I think it's a C tier. If you think differently, tell me why in the comments. Next is the EMS Strike. This is one of the most underrated stratagems in my opinion. Being able to slow down and freeze enemies is extremely useful, especially when things start to get hectic. But again, there are much better options to use your slot on, so I'm just going to keep this one in B tier. Next, we have the Smoke Strike. Now, just like the other Eagle Smoke Strike, they could be effective in very specific situations. Having one of these on a full team is pretty valuable, but I'd much rather run something else. I'm going to put this in B tier. Next is the Heavy Machine Gun Emplacement. Now, this is a fun one to place down and just start mowing down and going to town, especially on bugs. It does a lot of damage and can penetrate armor pretty decently. It just turns pretty slow, and I feel like on some bots, it feels just way too underpowered for what it is. I'm going to place this in C tier. Next is the Shield Generator Relay. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't care for it. It's useful against bots and lower difficulties, but doesn't really provide much value to a team. This is a C tier for now. I hope somehow they can make this better. Finally is the Tesla Tower. Now, you put this thing in a great spot. It does some decent damage against enemies, but it doesn't last very long no matter what. It also has a very surprisingly large range that unfortunately is probably going to end up killing more teammates than it will enemies. I almost want to put it in the hot caca section, but I just can't find it in me. I'm going to put this in the C tier. Next up is the Engineering Bay, where some of the best and worst stratagems come from. First up, Anti-Personnel Minefield. Let's be honest, we've killed more teammates with this than actual enemies. It dumps out a lot of mines and takes care of business, but the effective area is pretty small, and you have much better options to choose from than a minefield. This stratagem is poop. Supply Pack, an underrated piece of equipment. When you're low on ammo and your teammate runs up to you and throws you some, it's the best thing. Now I know most people are not going to run this by themselves. It's usually in a group where someone's been elected to bring ammo for the team. People who run Supply Pack on their own, they just deserve the highest decoration in Helldivers, and I love everybody who does it. Easy S tier. Next is the Grenade Launcher, and I'd say I like to play against the bots more than the Terminids, which the Grenade Launcher is less effective at killing bots, but much better against the Terminids. It could close bug holes, and it has a hard time damaging armor. I think I'm just going to put this in B tier. Next is the Laser Cannon, another weapon that seems underpowered. It doesn't really mix well with armor, which I think it should, especially against the bots, but it is good for hitting those weak points. But if you bring this into a mission with Terminids, you'll actually find it pretty useful there. I think I'm going to put this in B tier, and honestly, if it was better at getting through armor, I would probably consider bumping it to an A, but we're going to keep it in B for now. Next, Incendiary Mines. Same as the regular minefield, not a whole lot of value to be here, especially when it ends up killing more teammates than it does enemies. Straight doo-doo. Next we have the Guard Dog Rover, which is the guard dog with the laser, and it is so much better than the one with the assault rifle. Such a great option to bring into battle and let deal with some of those enemies chasing you. This is an A tier. Next we have the Arc Thrower, and I don't know, I just can't seem to get the Arc Thrower right. My friends tell me it's really good. I've never had a good experience using this. It seems very mid at best. I find it to work better against Terminids, but against bots, at least with what I've dealt with, practically useless. This is going to be I don't want to put it in hot caca, but I'm going to put it in C tier. That's what we're going to do. Next is the Ballistic Shield Backpack. Now, I don't care for the Ballistic Shield. It's probably one of the worst backpack slot stratagems, hands down. It's a great idea. The execution's lacking. It looks pretty dope, though, I cannot lie. Unfortunately, as of right now, hot caca. Finally, to wrap up the engineering bay, we have the shield generator pack. Now, this is one of the best things to bring into any missions. This is almost one of my must-haves. Bots or Terminids, this thing will withstand any attack from bots as long as you don't get squashed by a Bile Titan. It'll pretty much withstand any sort of attack. This is such an overpowered thing to have. It also prevents you from ragdolling, which, I mean, that alone makes it worth it. This is easily going into the S tier. Finally, to wrap things up, we have the Robotics Workshop, where we're going to find all of our sentries as well as our guard dog. First up, Machine Gun Sentry. Now, I'm going to be honest, most sentries will do so much better in specific scenarios, as well as placement is key. But the Machine Gun Sentry is completely useless. I feel like it runs out of ammo way too fast to be effective for long enough. This one is straight poop. Next is the Gatling Sentry. Now, the Gatling Sentry does what the machine gun should be doing, but better. When it's placed in a good spot, it just absolutely destroys hordes of Terminids and bots. I'm going to put this in B tier. Next, Mortar Sentry. This one's easy, you guys probably already know. It's extremely useful, especially on the defense missions. Having a squad where just each person has one of these makes the game so easy. The only drawbacks is if you start having to fight enemies close up, it's very easily for one of these to kill you and or teammates. All in all, having one of these in any mission types, if it's used properly and placed well, they provide so much firepower that makes this an easy S tier. Next is the guard dog. Now, this is the one with the machine gun, and honestly, I think it's a bit underpowered. Now, it's nice when you're solo and you have to deal with a horde of enemies. The guard dog will take care of the smaller enemies so you could focus your attention on the large ones. Overall, I don't really care for this guard dog. I think it's going to be a C tier. Next is the Autocannon Sentry. As long as this thing has good positioning, it's going to rip through everything, even those more armored enemies. I don't think people who run this put them in good positions often, but when you do, holy, you're going to find how great it performs and is one of the more underrated sentries. This is going to be an A tier. Next is the Rocket Sentry. I think it's also a good option, but I feel like it doesn't perform the way you expect it to. Even with great positioning, it could be a little tricky, but when it does perform, it blasts through just about everything, no problem. I wouldn't put this up in the S tier, but I think it's going to deserve at least an A tier. Finally, for the Robotics Workshop, we have the EMS Mortar Sentry. Now, I like to combine the use of the EMS mortar with the regular one. This thing slows down enemies, whereas the mortar just drops explosives right on target. I think this sentry is one of the most underrated in the game. I'm going to put it up with the regular mortar in S tier. And there's our completed tier list. Do you agree with where I placed them? Let me know down in the comments if you do or don't, and tell me why. Otherwise, let me know the name of your ship down in the comments. I want to know. Also, the Major told me that the people who like this video and subscribe to me are the most powerful Helldivers. So let me know what kind of Helldiver you are. Thank you all for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next one.